Shadows of Connecticut, the haunted house. Amanda and I had always dreamed of having a house of our own. The idea of a place where we could build our memories, without noisy neighbors and with a big backyard, seemed perfect. When we found that house in Connecticut, it seemed like a dream come true. It was an old house, built at the beginning of the 20th century, but it was well maintained and the price was affordable. We thought we'd been lucky. Little did we know what was to come. On moving day, the sun was shining and the sky was clear. We arrived with a truck full of boxes and furniture, ready to turn that space into our home. The neighborhood was quiet, with tall trees and spaced-out houses. It seemed like the perfect setting. When we entered the house for the first time, we felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The entrance hallway had wooden floors that creaked with every step, and the walls were decorated with old but charming wallpaper. Amanda was delighted with the spacious kitchen and the living room with a brick fireplace. "We're going to have lots of barbecues here," she said, imagining future gatherings with friends. We spent the day unpacking and organizing our things. Each room had its own charm. The master bedroom had a huge window overlooking the backyard, and the other rooms were perfect for an office and a guest room. Everything seemed to fit together perfectly. As the sun set, we finished tidying up the living room and sat down on the sofa, exhausted but satisfied. We ordered a pizza and toasted with beer, celebrating the start of a new phase in our lives. The first night, after all the excitement, we fell asleep quickly. The house was silent, with only the distant sound of crickets in the yard. Everything seemed so peaceful until, in the middle of the night, I was woken up by a strange noise. It was a low sound, almost like a whisper. I looked over and saw that Amanda was also awake, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, trying to understand where the sound was coming from. It sounded like someone was walking down the corridor. I stood up slowly, trying not to make a sound. With every step I took, the floor creaked under my feet. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice echoing through the house. No response, just silence. I looked out of the hallway window, but saw nothing but the darkness of the yard. I checked every room downstairs, but found nothing out of the ordinary. When I returned to the bedroom, Amanda was still awake, her eyes fixed on the door. "There's no one there. It must have been our imagination," I said, trying to calm her down. But deep down, I knew there was something strange, something we couldn't explain. We tried to go back to sleep, but the feeling of unease remained. That was just the first of many disturbing nights in that house. After that first strange night, we tried to carry on with our routine as normal. During the day, the house seemed completely normal, illuminated by sunlight and full of the common sounds of a quiet neighborhood. Amanda was busy decorating and organizing the last details, while I took care of minor repairs and adjustments. But at night, everything changed. On the third night, we were relaxing in the living room watching a movie when we heard the first strange noise. It was a low, dragging sound, as if someone was moving heavy furniture upstairs. Amanda looked at me with wide eyes, clearly frightened. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "I heard it," I replied, trying to sound calmer than I really was. "I'll go and have a look." I got up and went to the stairs. Each step creaked under my feet, amplifying the tense silence of the house. When I got upstairs, everything seemed normal. The rooms were exactly as we had left them, with no sign of anything out of place. I returned to the living room and tried to reassure Amanda. "There's nothing upstairs. Maybe it's the house adjusting, because of age and all." She nodded, but I knew she wasn't convinced, and I wasn't either. We tried to go back to the movie, but our concentration was gone. Every little sound, every crack in the floor, seemed amplified, keeping us in a constant state of alert. That same night, at around 2 a.m, Amanda woke me up again. "There's someone in the hallway," she whispered, her face pale. I rubbed my eyes and tried to listen. There was indeed the sound of soft footsteps, as if someone was walking slowly down the corridor outside our room. My heart started beating faster, and I got out of bed, trying to make as little noise as possible. I opened the bedroom door slowly and looked down the dark corridor. There was nothing there, but the footsteps continued, now seeming to come from the opposite direction. It was as if something was playing with us. I went back into the bedroom and closed the door, trying to stay calm. "There's no one out there," said Amanda, although I was doubting my own words. We tried to go back to sleep, but the silence now seemed oppressive. Any small noise startled us. Eventually, tiredness overcame us, and we managed to doze off for a few hours until dawn. The next morning, the sunlight seemed to dispel the fears of the night before, but an uneasy feeling persisted. Amanda suggested that perhaps we should get someone to inspect the house, to see if there were any structural problems that could be causing the noises. I agreed, but deep down I knew it wasn't just the house that was old. There was something else, something we couldn't see, but which was clearly there, sharing the space with us. The following nights only confirmed our suspicions. The noises became more frequent and more intense. They weren't just footsteps. They were whispers, scratches, and even low laughter echoing through the dark corridors. Amanda started sleeping with the light on, and I kept a flashlight next to the bed. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. It was as if, with every step we took, there were invisible eyes following us, studying our movements. The house, which seemed like a refuge during the day, turned into a place of silent terror at night. We were beginning to realize that the house held dark secrets, secrets that threatened our sanity and safety. And, despite our reluctance to admit it, we knew we needed to find out what was going on before it was too late. On the fifth night, Amanda woke me up again. This time, she was really scared. "I heard someone whispering my name," she said, her eyes full of fear. "Are you sure?" I asked, still half drowsy. "I'm sure. It was right here in the bedroom," she replied, her voice shaking. I tried to calm her down, telling her it was probably just the wind or our imagination playing tricks, but deep down I was worried too. We decided to leave the lamp on and try to go back to sleep. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, a dark figure, almost indistinguishable, but clearly there. We couldn't see its face, but we could feel its gaze fixed on us. Amanda started crying and I froze, not knowing what to do. The figure didn't move, it just watched us. The air became cold and heavy, as if a sinister presence had invaded the space. Every second seemed like an eternity. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. Finally, the figure began to disappear, like smoke dissipating into the air. When it was finally gone, the room seemed to return to normal, but the fear was still there. Amanda was panicking, and I didn't know how to explain what we had just seen. "We need to get out of here," she said, still crying. "We can't stay another night in this house." I wanted to agree, but something in me wanted to understand what was going on. We decided that the next day we would investigate more about the history of the house and try to find some explanation. But that night, no one else slept. The next morning, the mood was heavy. We barely exchanged words while having coffee. The memory of the figure in the room haunted us, and I knew we needed answers. We went to the local library and started looking for any information about the house. We discovered that the house had belonged to a family many years ago, but they had mysteriously disappeared. Some people in the town said the house was haunted, but we thought they were just scare stories. We talked to some old locals, and one of them told us a story that gave us goosebumps. He said that, many years ago, a family lived in the house and they all disappeared without a trace. The only thing that remained was the legend that the spirit of the father, a violent man, still haunted the place, trapped there after a tragedy. This information only increased our fear. We returned home with more questions than answers. During the day, we tried to pretend that everything was fine, but we knew that the night would bring new horrors. That night, before going to bed, Amanda placed crucifixes and candles around the room. We weren't particularly religious, but anything that could give us a little protection was welcome. Even so, when night fell, the noises started again. This time, the whispers were louder and clearer. It was as if someone was trying to communicate with us. Amanda held my hand tightly, fear evident in her eyes. Suddenly, the figure appeared again, but this time it was closer to our bed. We could see more detail now, the silhouette of a man, tall and thin, with an empty, disturbing stare. He raised his hand, pointing directly at Amanda. "Get out!" he whispered, his voice echoing through the room. Amanda screamed and I stood up, trying to protect her. But, just as before, the figure disappeared, leaving us with the feeling that we were being watched by something evil. That night was the last straw. We decided that we needed to get out of that house as soon as possible. We packed our things in a hurry and set off before dawn. As we drove along the dark road, leaving the house behind, I looked in the rearview mirror and, for a moment, I thought I saw the figure in the window, watching us go. We knew we needed help to understand what had happened in that house and, more importantly, how to make sure we never went through it again. After leaving the house in a panic, we found a hotel in the next town and spent the night there. We could barely sleep, still shaken by what we had seen. The next day, we decided to investigate the history of the house further and find out what was really going on. Our first destination was the local library. We spent hours going through old archives, newspapers, and historical records. We found some vague information about the family who lived in the house many years ago. They were the Millers, a seemingly normal family. But in 1957, they all mysteriously disappeared. The newspapers of the time spoke of an intense search for the family, but they never found anything. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, just an empty house. The only thing the investigators found was the diary of the father, Henry Miller. We decided we needed to read that diary. With some difficulty, we managed to access the municipal archives, and after much insistence, we were allowed to see the diary. The pages were aged and yellowed, but still legible. Henry Miller wrote about his family with love, but as the pages progressed, the tone changed. He began to talk about voices he heard at night, shadowy figures he saw in the house, and a presence he felt was always watching. The last diary entries were disturbing. Henry spoke of being possessed by something evil, something that controlled him and forced him to do horrible things. The last page was stained and almost illegible, but we managed to make out one sentence that gave us chills. "Don't let the darkness consume you." We left the library with more questions than answers. We decided we needed to talk to someone who could help us understand what was going on. We remembered an old friend from college, Tom, who specialized in paranormal phenomena. We called him and, as luck would have it, he was in town for a conference. We arranged to meet him at the hotel. Tom arrived in the evening, bringing with him equipment and books on the paranormal. We told him everything that had happened, from the noises to the figure in the room. He listened attentively, taking notes and asking questions. "You're dealing with something very serious," he finally said. "It seems that the house has a very strong residual energy, possibly linked to the traumatic events that happened there. And the figure you saw, well, that sounds like an entity that is still trapped in that place." We asked if there was any way of getting rid of the entity or at least better understanding what was going on. Tom suggested that we return to the house for a more in-depth investigation. The idea terrified us, but we knew it was the only way to get answers. The next day, we returned to the house with Tom. He had brought a lot of equipment with him, infrared cameras, audio recorders, motion detectors, and a whole bunch of other stuff that looked like something out of a horror movie. Amanda was visibly nervous, and so was I, but we knew we had to face it. As we entered the house, the atmosphere seemed even heavier than before. Tom set up his equipment and started recording everything. With every step, the floor creaked beneath our feet, amplifying the tense silence that filled the place. "Let's start with an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon session," said Tom. He positioned the audio recorders in different parts of the house and asked us to remain silent while he asked questions. If there is anyone here with us, please come forward. Who are you? What do you want? Tom asked, his voice calm and controlled. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, we heard a low sound, like a whisper. Amanda grabbed my hand, and I felt my heart race. Tom checked the recorders and, as he played back the audio, we could clearly hear a voice whispering, "Get out." Fear set in again, but Tom seemed almost excited. That confirms that there is a presence here. We need to keep going. We decided to do a sweep with the infrared cameras. As we walked through the house, we saw indistinct shapes on the screens, like shadows moving. When we reached the room where we first saw the figure, the temperature dropped abruptly. Tom adjusted the camera and, at that moment, a dense shadow appeared on the screen, standing in the same place where we saw the figure. We felt a chill run down our spine. The entity was there watching us. "We need to understand what's keeping it here," said Tom. He suggested we do a direct communication session. Amanda was reluctant, but agreed. We sat in a circle with Tom in the center holding a communication board. He explained that the idea was to try to talk directly to the entity and find out what it wanted. We placed our hands on the board and began. "If you are here, please communicate with us. Who are you? Why are you here?" Tom asked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the pointer began to move. It formed simple but frightening words. "Help. Trapped. Henry." Amanda's heart raced. "Henry Miller?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," was the reply. We continued the session, and the entity revealed more about his imprisonment in the house. It said that something evil was controlling him, preventing him from resting. He begged for help, but didn't know how to break free. Tom closed the session, promising that we would try to help him. We left the house feeling that we were finally beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. We needed to find out how to free Henry Miller's spirit and perhaps finally bring peace to that haunted house. After the communication session with Henry Miller's spirit, the tension in the house seemed to have eased a little, but the fear persisted. We knew that we needed to find a definitive solution to free Henry and eliminate the evil presence that held him prisoner. With Tom's help, we began to formulate a plan. Tom suggested that we look for a specialist in exorcisms or someone with experience in spiritual cleansing rituals. He knew a priest called Father O'Leary, who had helped with similar cases in the past. We agreed that this was our best chance of solving the problem once and for all. The next day, we went to the church where Father O'Leary served. It was an old church, with colorful stained glass windows and an air of tranquility that contrasted sharply with what we were experiencing. Father O'Leary welcomed us with a warm smile, but when we explained our situation, his countenance turned serious. "Cases like this are rare, but not impossible," he said. "If there's an evil entity trapping an innocent soul, we need to act quickly. I'll help you in any way I can." We scheduled the exorcism for the following evening. Father O'Leary had brought a number of items with him: holy water, crucifixes, candles, and a book of ancient rituals. He explained to us that the process could be long and difficult, but that we shouldn't lose faith. We returned to the house with a mixture of fear and hope. Amanda was visibly tense, and so was I. Tom set up his equipment again, ready to record everything. When night fell, the atmosphere in the house became heavier than ever. Father O'Leary began the ritual in the entrance hall, sprinkling holy water and reciting prayers in Latin. As he went on, the temperature seemed to drop and a feeling of oppression gripped the room. We reached the room where we had first seen the figure, and that's when things really started to get intense. The candles flickered violently, and we could hear whispers coming from all directions. Father O'Leary continued with his prayers, keeping his voice steady. Amanda held my hand tightly, her eyes fixed on the priest. Suddenly, the figure appeared again, clearer than ever. It was Henry, or what was left of him. His form was dark and distorted, but his eyes showed deep pain. Father O'Leary raised the crucifix and began to command the evil entity to leave. Hic locus est domus Dei, iti porta celi, dissidite spiritus malignus, he proclaimed. Henry's figure began to twitch, as if he were fighting an invisible force. The whispers turned into screams, and the whole house seemed to vibrate with a sinister energy. But Father O'Leary didn't stop. He continued with his prayers, his voice getting louder and more authoritative. Then, with a final scream, Henry's figure collapsed. The evil presence seemed to have been expelled, and a sense of relief filled the room. The air became lighter, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. "It's done," said Father O'Leary, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Henry is free now. The entity has been banished." Amanda burst into tears, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. I hugged her, feeling a peace I hadn't felt for weeks. Tom switched off the equipment and checked the records. We had proof of what had happened, but more importantly, we had our sanity back. Over the next few days, the house looked different. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, and for the first time, we really felt at home. We decided that we would still sell the house, but not because we were afraid. We wanted a fresh start, away from the dark memories. Before we moved, we held a small ceremony in the backyard, lighting candles and saying a few words of farewell to Henry. We felt that he was finally at peace, and it gave us a sense of closure. We moved into an apartment in the city, and since then, we've never had any problems. Sometimes we find ourselves thinking about the house and what we saw there. Was it real, or had our minds played tricks on us? We'll never know for sure. What we do know is that we never want to go through anything like that again. Whatever it was an experience that changed our lives forever. And even if we escape, the memory of that house in Connecticut, with its dark nights and disturbing secrets, will stay with us forever.